Awesome. So thanks so much, everyone, for taking the time to join us today. And thank you particularly to Joel and Noah from Rewiring America. These guys and the folks over at Rewiring are, quite literally the people who wrote the book on electrification. And so we're really lucky and excited to have them with us today. And it's really just, an opportunity for all of you to just, come with your questions, right? We know that this process of electrifying everything can feel complicated, it's a logistical thing that you're taking on, it's a financial thing that you're taking on, and can feel a little, overwhelming. But there's so much great knowledge and information out there that we want to connect you with and give you access to, so that this process can be as easeful and as cheap and as enjoyable for you as possible. And so maybe to start, I'd love to just give Noah and Joel an opportunity to just introduce themselves briefly. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about kind of how you came to do this work and be where you are. And then we can jump into the questions. So if we want to kick it off with you, Joel.
Sure. So thanks for having us. I'm Joel. I'm on the special projects team at Rewiring America. I got involved in this work. I've had an interest in climate since 2000, when I finally realized what the climate problem was. And figured out that it was not the ozone hole. And so I've sort of been thinking about the problem for 20 years, working on it on and off. And I had worked for Saul Griffith previously. Saul, if you don't know, is a polymath engineer, artist, and has been focused also on the climate problem for a long time. He was writing a book in 2019, 2020, which came out called Electrify, which was talking about why switching to all electric appliances was going to take advantage of the renewable energy that we've been talking about for a long time. And I reached out to him. I was moving to Washington, D.C. area, and I said, "What do you think I should do?" And he said, "Well, let me pitch you on Rewiring America." And he encouraged me to write what became Electrify Everything in Your Home, which is a guide to all the appliances that you might want to upgrade, as well as questions that you can ask your contractor. And I've been with the organization pretty much since 2021, and got hired, as an employee last year. And now I do all kinds of different things around the org, just supporting people and answering questions and just generally trying to transform the market so everyone can electrify everything.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joel. And for folks, I just dropped the link to the Electrify Everything in Your Home guide that Joel just mentioned. So if you want to check that out, that link is in the chat. Noah.
Yeah, great to be with you all, and thanks for having us on. I'm Noah Goldmann. I'm a federal policy associate at Rewiring America. So I'm working almost entirely on the Inflation Reduction Act and the other federal incentives and federal initiatives to advance electrification throughout the economy. I started at Rewiring back in June, and then within sort of a month or two, I got thrown into the IRA stuff. So that's been a lot of my time and attention since then. And so I've been deep in the 700 pages of text. As Joel knows, he's there with me. But yeah, happy to answer questions and share our knowledge, and hopefully learn something from you guys too, because as we're advocating for policy on the federal level and state and local levels, we want to make sure that it's working for the people it's intended to work for. So if you're running into barriers or issues or particular questions, let us know so we can try to do our best to reduce those barriers and answer those questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, let's go ahead and just dive right into your questions, because that's really what this time is for today. And so, yeah, if you want to raise your hand down under the reactions on the bottom, or if you want to just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. If you want to type your question in the chat, whatever works best for you. And we've got Michael. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you. A couple of questions to start with. Heat pump air conditioning. Does that system typically run 24/7, or does it only work when the thermostat kicks in?
I can try and answer this. So it's an interesting question. For air, so in general, the best heat pumps now are what are called variable capacity heat pumps, sometimes also called inverter driven heat pumps. They're basically computer controlled heat pumps. And instead of being single stage, which means it's either on or off, or instead of being two stage, which means it's like high, medium, or off, they can be variable and on from anywhere from 25% to 100% capacity. And in general, if you set the temperature to someplace comfortable and just leave it on all the time, it will run more or less all the time, but it's designed to run all the time, 24/7. And you don't really need to set it back at night and, you could a couple degrees, whatever, but they generally are most efficient if you just sort of turn them on and leave them on. But if it's a variable capacity, it will not be running at full blast all the time. So the beauty of it is that it adjusts to what your house needs. And so, it's sort of like the difference between taking a shower by having a bucket of water dumped on your head or by having the water just generally sprinkling down. The idea behind these variable capacity ones are that it just sort of gets you wet enough to finish the analogy, which sort of stops working, but to just generally keep you at a constant temperature over an extended period of time. So in general, the advice is just leave it on all the time and leave it alone if you have one of those systems. If you have an older system that's single stage or two stage, they generally won't be on all the time. They'll turn on, they'll heat up the air or cool down the air to the set point, and then it'll turn off until it, warms up or cools down, and then it'll turn back on. And so it sort of spikes around, whereas the variable capacity heat pump just sort of comes to temperature and tries to maintain it there.
Okay, good. Thank you for that background. Just to give you my background, I met with two contractors last week and found that I didn't know enough to ask questions. So thank you. The other question that I have, what about the electrical power? By that I mean, again, for a heat pump air conditioner, do I need to upgrade my electrical panel?
Do you know how big your electrical panel is?
125.
125 amps.
Right.
So for other people on the call, in general, if you go and look at your electrical panel, there'll be one big main breaker at the top, as well as all the sub breakers down below. And the number on that big breaker is sort of like the size of the panel. 125 amps, you should be able to electrify pretty much on that if you plan ahead. It's hard to look something up. I'll look something up as the next question is getting asked and put it in the chat. But so there's a couple of considerations here. One is the amount of electricity that's coming into your house. That's called the electrical service. And if you have 125 amps, that's fine. You shouldn't need to upgrade that. Then there's the panel itself, and that's the one where all the breakers and stuff, and you need everything to fit onto that panel. But if your panel is full, then there are other things you can do. You can either install a sub panel, which just basically gives you more space, or you can install what are known as slim breakers, where you sort of get two spaces for each current single space. And so that's like the physical size that things can go onto the panel. And then there's the stuff that you hook up. So, you're, currently, if you have an air conditioner, maybe that takes up a space on your panel. But if you get a heat pump, that will replace that space on your panel, right? And you can ask that your indoor and outdoor units be on the same circuit if they size it properly and they buy the right equipment. So it'll still only take up one space on the panel, as opposed to having a separate circuit for both the indoor unit and the outdoor unit. And then if you have a gas water heater and you replace that with an electric water heater, that's also going to take up space on your panel.
Right.
So
Right.
you do kind of want to plan ahead and ask your contractor, if possible, say, hey, I'm trying to electrify everything. Can you take care of my panel so that you don't just rush in there and take up as much space as you think you need? Try and be courteous of the other contractors who will be coming after you. And I will, like I said, I'll put a link in the chat to a guide that sort of focuses on electrifying on 100 amps, so that you don't need to upgrade your panel. And with 125, you should be okay.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that question, Michael, and that response, Joel. Tim Jackson.
I had to unmute there. I have a dog with a squeak toy at my feet, so there could be some squeaking that you guys hear. I was gonna say, which might help the previous person, unless you're starting from scratch. Whatever HVAC company that you use should be able to use what's kind of already there. I've got a 2-story house, and so I've got a split system HVAC system, and I just got 2 new heat pumps installed, and they were able to use our ductwork that was there, our electrical panels that were there. So really, they just had to bring in the equipment itself and replace with the 20-plus-year-old systems that I had. So like I said, if you're not starting from scratch, you're probably okay. But what I wanted to kind of ask about is priorities. So as you guys know, Joel and Noah and anybody else who's been trying to upgrade, it's not inexpensive, right? So the 2 new heat pumps that I just got installed were up to about $23,000. And I would like to continue doing stuff, but what sort of are the priorities? I would love, I'm just looking at the graphic that you guys provided for this meeting. I would love a heat pump water heater. Our hot water heater is probably 20 plus years old and not very efficient. I would like an EV charger, hoping to plan for an electric vehicle in the future, but I'm not sure I can afford the charger or the electric vehicle right now. If I would have known what I knew in 2018 when I bought a new gas stove, I would have not bought a gas stove, but I've got one now. So it's like, I guess my question for you guys is, keeping money, an expense in mind, what's the best way? What are sort of the priorities to essentially electrify everything in your home?
I think it's so, in terms of, well, there's sort of 2 answers to the question. The first answer is in terms of like, what's probably going to have the most impact on, let's say, reducing your fossil fuel use in your house. For most households, the car is the biggest fossil fuel user, followed by the furnace, followed by the water heater, and then everything else sort of after that. And the other things like cooking, and if you have a gas dryer, those are relatively small users. So, gasoline, you can imagine people going to the gas station every week and filling up with 10 gallons of gas, and followed by a furnace, etc. So in terms of the environmental impact, that's something of a rough ordering. But in terms of everybody's individual houses, the ordering is really whatever is next in line to be replaced. We like to say, when it dies, electrify. And so if you have an air conditioner that's nearing its end of life, then here we are, it's April, and you're thinking about upgrading this summer. Great. Don't get another air conditioner, get a heat pump, and try and size it if you can to be an all-year heat pump. So heat pumps, for those who don't know, are they're air conditioners that can run in reverse to also heat your house. You will find HVAC contractors who say that heat pumps don't work in cold climates. but that is outdated information. The biggest heat pump installers in the world, or in the US, the biggest heat pump installer is Maine, which is quite cold. And I think globally it might be Norway. So they definitely work in the cold. And so if you replace your air conditioner with a heat pump, then you can potentially never turn your furnace on again. But at least, even if it's not a whole home replacement, you can turn your furnace on only a small part of the year and have the heat pump do most of the fall and most of the spring. So what was I going to say? The answer to your question is, you have a water heater that's 25 years old. That's probably next in line to be replaced. They generally have like a 10 plus year lifetime, and so you've gotten good use out of it. We've done some analysis. We think it's probably like on the $5,000 cost to replace to get a heat pump water heater installed. That's the installed cost. So that's the equipment plus the installation. But the Inflation Reduction Act has a $2,000 tax credit for a heat pump water heater. So that should bring the cost down to around $3,000. And then there are these programs, which Noah can talk about, that are rolling out later this year, which are more for helping people who are income qualified to get further assistance with the cost. So Noah, you want to talk about the tax credits versus the upfront discounts?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I think Joel touched nicely on a few different decision-making points. The first being the emissions, and then maybe just the life cycle of your equipment. I'll say before we get to the incentives that there are also folks who will replace appliances based on the potential health impact. So maybe if you have a young kid or a parent who's living with you and you want to cut down on that asthma risk, that's might be a reason to prioritize a gas stove replacement with an induction stove. So that's just another way that we see people prioritize those decisions. But then in terms of the Inflation Reduction Act incentives, there are two buckets of incentives. There are tax credits and there are rebates. The tax credits are available now. So as of January 1st of this year, as Joel mentioned, there's the $2,000 tax credit for heat pumps, $2,000 tax credit for heat pump water heaters. There's also, both of those come with a $600 tax credit for an electrical panel upgrade. So if you are installing a heat pump water heater and you do need to upgrade your electrical panel, if you do them both at once, you can get that $600 to go toward the electrical panel too, which I think is it's worth taking advantage of that. And there are a few different ways that you can sort of game the tax credits to maximize the value. But then later this year into 2024, states will be rolling out the IRA rebate programs. So there are two different programs. There are what we're calling the electrification rebates and the efficiency rebates. And I can put more information about both of these in the chat too. But the electrification rebates are specifically designed for income eligible households. So that's households with either an income of either less than 80% of their area median income or less than 150% of area median income. If you have an income less than 80% of your area median, then you can qualify for $14,000 towards electric appliance replacements that can cover up to 100% of costs. So that's $8,000 for a heat pump that could cover the entire cost of a heat pump if you qualify, if you're income eligible. And then if you're between 80 and 150% AMI, it'll cover 50% of costs. So that's quite a significant incentive to look forward to if you do qualify. And then the other rebate program, the efficiency rebates, are designed to reward whole home retrofits that save either 20 or 35% of whole home energy usage. That one is a little bit more complicated, but once states start rolling it out, either late this year or early next year, then if you're pursuing a whole home retrofit, or even if you want to group a few appliance replacements at once, so for example, a heat pump plus weatherization, or a heat pump plus a heat pump water heater, it can get you to those energy saving thresholds, and you can qualify for those incentives too. But they're not available yet, but they will be soon.
Well, a quick follow up about the tax credits. So it's $2,000 per thing. So I got 2 new heat pumps, and if I would get a heat pump water heater by the end of the year, so essentially that's cumulative. So that would be $6,000 in tax credit for 3 separate appliances. Is that how that works?
Yeah, not. I wish that's how it works. Unfortunately, it's the $2,000 cap per year. So
okay.
you can access that credit again and again, which is a huge bonus. So if you were to wind back the clock and install one heat pump in 2023, another heat pump in 2024, and then the heat pump water heater in 2025, that's how you could get the $6,000. But for any given year, it's a $2,000 limit for that credit.
Okay, thanks. And that means I will definitely wait until next year for the heat pump hot water heater.
Exactly. Yeah. And if there are any folks who are considering, for example, getting a central heat pump, a ducted heat pump for most of their house, but then if you have an office upstairs or a detached garage and you're considering getting a mini split for that smaller area too, if you split it up over the 2 years, that can be a nice way to use the tax credit.
I had a question kind of related to that. So you were talking about the larger tax credits that are coming at the end of the year. Is that the same thing go there in terms of, so if I were to buy a heat pump now and get the $2,000 tax credit, and then if my state implemented the new tax credits at the end of the year, could I get another heat pump with that credit, or are those two sort of I can only take one of those in a year?
Yeah, so the terminology is a little bit confusing. The tax credits are available now. The rebates, which are really sort of point of sale discounts, so they don't have to do with taxes. They're not going through IRS. The rebates will be administered by your state energy office. They're the ones that will be available late this year or next year. They probably won't be retroactive, but if you are income eligible, then yes, you might be able to access both, but it's likelier that either you are income eligible for the electrification rebates, in which you should probably wait if you can, or you're not income eligible, in which case the tax credits are your best incentive available.
Okay.
Great, thanks. I want to just note Karen's question in the chat before we move to Roger and then Rich. I think we've hit on this prioritization a little bit, but if there's anything else you want to add to this question about installing for a new house with HVAC system with ducts, and what type of heat pump she should be looking for. So if there's anything to add on that one.
So yeah, check the size. All right, so I was just reading the question. It's 5 years old, the house. It has an HVAC system with ducts. You could be a good candidate for getting a central heat pump. So in the Electrify Everything in your home guide, it goes into like the different types of heat pumps. You could sort of think of it as 3 categories. There's central heat pumps, which are like central air conditioners in that they use the ducts to distribute hot air around, or cold air through those ducts. Then there's what are known as ductless mini splits. And what that basically means is that you have an outdoor unit and one or multiple indoor units, but there's no ducts or anything. It's just the stuff that moves the heat around, the refrigerant, as it's known, goes directly from the outdoor unit to the indoor unit. And then the indoor unit is, taking that heat and circulating it locally. And so with a mini split, and it gets confusing also because you can have a ducted mini split where the refrigerant goes inside and then the ducts are just local, etc. Again, read the guide. It gets a little confusing, but you can have an HVAC contractor come out and check out your ducts and see if they're good enough to use. If they're 5 years old, they're probably pretty good shape. And it could make sense to just get a central heat pump to replace your current air conditioner and furnace and then be done. Or if your ducts are in bad shape because whoever built the place didn't do a very good job or whatever, they're sized improperly, then maybe it could make sense to get mini splits. And then the other type of unit is what people think of as like window units, like window air conditioners or portable air conditioners. They now have versions of those that are called portable. They're not, they are portable heat pumps. And again, a heat pump is just an air conditioner that can reverse to pump heat into your house instead of just pumping heat out of your house. It's not yet clear whether these units are going to qualify for the Inflation Reduction Act credits or rebates, unfortunately, but it's pending. But particularly for renters, or for people who have, particularly cold rooms or spaces that they want to condition, those kinds of units can make sense. So you can get essentially now a window air conditioner that has heat. And so what does that mean? That means you use it as an air conditioner in the summer. Then when winter comes, you say, now I want heat. And it basically works exactly the same way, except now it's making your room warm instead of cold. And just like before, I said a heat pump can help with shoulder season. One of these window units or packaged units can also help with shoulder season. Or as a renter, I have no control over my furnace or my air conditioner for that matter, or how leaky this house is with air and insulation. But we bought a portable heat pump unit, and I could put in the chat here this webinar that goes over some of the benefits of portable units. We used it to keep my partner. She likes it warm, and so we used it in her room all winter. And then I like it cold, so we're going to use it in my room all summer, and just avoid turning on the central furnace or the central air conditioner as much as possible. So similarly, I'll just, while I'm on this renter idea, or even for people like a person before who said he just bought a gas stove a few years ago, you can get something like this portable induction burner, which is a very efficient way to cook, plugs in a regular wall outlet. Again, as a renter, but even if you're a homeowner who's not yet ready to replace the stove, you can just buy one of these things, put it on top of your stove, and we use it all the time instead of turning on our gas burners. So these are like renter solutions that also work for homeowners who aren't yet ready to invest in full upgrades. But when you are ready to invest, you can use our calculator to see what you're eligible for, and then determine whether you are eligible for the upfront rebates, in which case wait until the end of this year, the beginning of next year, until it rolls out in your state, or everyone else, where you're eligible for tax credits. And then those are available now. So you can start planning to buy stuff as soon as, right now. And then for the people who are on the edge, it's like, you can, we were talking about like, it's good for this tax year. You can get your heat pump on December 31st and your heat pump water heater on January 1st, 2024.
That's great. Thanks, Joel. Roger.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, you guys, for doing this. I have a question about more the generation end of things. So if this isn't in your wheelhouse, let me know. But right now we have natural gas running our heat and our hot water heater and our stove and our dryer and all this stuff, and want to shift over to probably a renewable source. So some combination of solar and wind. And so my first question, like right now we have a backup gasoline generator that powers the whole house when power goes out. And so I've been thinking in terms of wattages, because that's what that thing is rated. But sounds like I should be paying more attention to amps to determine what the house needs. No. Anyway, so this is a 6,500 watt generator, and it runs everything that we need. I'm just curious, a couple of things. Should I be building a solar and wind hybrid system to deliver that same amount? And I assume that that amount is going to go up when I add, heat pump and hot water pump. My wife has outlawed an electric stove, so that part I'm going to have to live with. But I don't know if the question makes sense. I'm just curious, like if I should be how much I should be thinking about building a hybrid solar wind system to deliver.
So first, for your outlawed stove from your wife, I recommend trying. For $100, you can get one of those portable induction burners and see if you can't change your mind, because you
Yeah.
have gas now, right?
Yeah.
Like, people who haven't tried induction think that they love gas, but they love it less when you stop and say, hey, you're actually burning fossil fuel that we dug up out of the ground in your kitchen, and you're probably not even exhausting it very well. Even though you have to vent all of your combustion gas for your furnace and for your water heater, you don't have to do that for your kitchen. And so I think the air pollution in your kitchen is not great. So try the induction stove. That
Right.
said, yes, it gets a little confusing, the like watts versus amps. The electrical panel is rated in terms of the amps, which is the electrical current that is coming into your house. And so it's like the flow of electricity. And what you said is you have 6,500 watts or 6.5 kilowatts of power. It's a measure of the energy flow, whereas amps is the measure of the current, of the charge flow. But again, it's unfortunately, we do a bad job of teaching about electricity in this country. So when we're saying, hey, everyone, electrify everything, it gets a little confusing. But that said, the 6,500 watts that you have available from your backup generator, you can think about it as like, okay, well, I have we're used to 100-watt light bulbs, right? So you could run 65 of those 100-watt light bulbs using your backup power. Obviously, you're not running 6,500-watt light bulbs, but you're running your air conditioner or whatever, you're running your lights. As you electrify, the power requirements will go up, but there are ways to essentially isolate just the things that you need onto a sub panel, right? So like you can get your electrician to be like, look, I want my internet to be up. I want the lights in the living room to be up. I want the electric stove, if you go that way, to be up. And so you say, those are the critical circuits that go on that panel. If you get a heat pump, you want your heat pump to be up during a grid outage. And so then you need to have enough power to run those things, and you can isolate them on that circuit. So it doesn't have to run your whole house. And then you can size the solar system or the wind system, if you live someplace where wind is a viable option on your property, to try and replace that 6,500 watts, or you could upsize it. So, you could get 10,000 watts or 20,000 watts if you have enough space. You have to pay for it, but it's, larger installations can make sense if you have the cash and you have the space for them. And particularly if your utility has a program where they'll buy the power back from you at a good price. So I guess I'm saying that you can do a one-to-one replacement. Say I have 6,500 watts now and I just need to replace that. So in an emergency, I don't need to use that. I should also add that for solar, most inverters won't so you need a solar panel, and then you need a way of converting that power into electricity that your house can use. Again, this is like electricity, but it's the main idea is that in a grid outage, there's a switch that's going to isolate your house from the grid. And unfortunately, your solar panels, for most people, aren't going to work once that switch goes off, unless you have a battery backup. Okay. You can either buy a dedicated battery backup now, or it's coming to market now, particularly led by the Ford F-150 Lightning. Soon, EVs will be able to power your house. So you can think about it in terms of, right now I have a 6,500 watt backup. I can replace the 6,500 watts directly with a 6,500 watt solar panel array, or I can replace it with a 6,500 watt wind generating array. Or you can get batteries that can also help support you during the grid outage, or when the EV becomes available as a backup. You need enough power that can be stored by that battery to be able to run what you want. And so you should talk to solar installers. You can go to a site called energysage.com, and they will help get you quotes from solar installers, and they'll tell you what the power output of that array will be. It could be 10 kilowatts, 10,000 watts, in which case you will overwhelm what is currently provided by your generator backup. And you don't have to get rid of your generator backup either. We're not we're not like total purists where it's like everybody has to stop burning fossil fuels today. That'd be great if everybody did that, but we understand that this is a process and you're learning, and having multiple redundant backups while you're working on your resiliency is okay. Again, like I mentioned before, trying to get a heat pump that could replace your entire furnace, that's ideal. But if you can't do that, getting a heat pump to replace your current air conditioner and taking the load off of your furnace in most of the year, and then, in 10 or 15 years when your furnace is dying, maybe getting a second heat pump or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, this can be incremental, particularly as we consider what the costs are. But you're thinking along the right lines, which is like, if I want to replace my current backup system, what do I need? Talk to your installers, try and work out what makes the most sense and is the most affordable, but for the best bang for the buck. And I think, you're already well on the path. So just work on your wife's gas stove addiction.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Just one quick little follow-up question. When you were talking about have to have a battery for when the power goes out, I assume I just want to understand the dynamics of this. So just direct energy use from the panels or from the wind may or may not cover energy uses at any given moment, right? Is that the idea? So that's what the battery thing is for. So I'd have a reliable, steady flow of power. Or
no, that's a good question. No, essentially it's because the electricals, if you're tied into the grid, they want you isolated from the grid when the grid is down, because the people who are working to bring the grid back up don't want to have to interact with stray power that's coming from the rooftops around town. So they essentially have a switch that says, okay, you're cut off while the grid is down, and you can come back on once the grid's back up. So then having a battery allows your solar panels to be charging your batteries, right? They're like I was saying, your solar system essentially has
wasted.
It's not that it's, well, no, it would essentially cut the power from your solar panels unless you have the battery, or unless you have a special, it's called an inverter. And it's a thing that essentially takes what's called, then you get into like AC and DC, alternating current, direct current. It's like a little device that can switch your direct current from your solar panels into the alternating current that most of your stuff in your house needs. There are a couple of those, I think one, maybe two on the market that like would let you run your solar panels in the event of a grid outage, but most of them don't do that. And, but having a battery gets rid of that problem.
I see.
Because then you can run stuff from your battery. So it's becomes like this little closed system.
That's great. And I think your main point was I have a switch now where, because of the generator, where I can't, I disconnect the generator power from the grid. So that same flow back doesn't happen from a generator. It's the same idea, right?
Same idea.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Rich.
Thanks. I'm gonna go back to the cap on the tax credits. So we've been talking so much about heat pumps. I just want to make sure you were saying that it was 2,000 total for an entire year, regardless of how many appliances you replace or how many items you replace. The total per year is 2,000, or is it just 2,000 per category?
Yeah. So there are two buckets of the tax credit. So there's the overall limit for the tax credit. This is the energy efficient home improvement tax credit, is actually $3,200 per year. So you cannot exceed that limit. Within that limit, there are two sub-limits. One of them is for heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. That's $2,000 per year. So no matter how many heat pumps and heat pump water heaters you install, you can only get a maximum of $2,000 per year, but you can spread that out and get multiple $2,000 credits. The other bucket, the remaining $1,200, comes from weatherization, panel upgrades, and an energy audit credit. So you could get $1,200 for weatherization, you could get $600 for a panel upgrade, you could get $500 for windows, you could get $150 for an energy audit, up to $1,200 per year. But that's the subcap. So it's a little bit confusing because it's going through IRS and everything is confusing there. But we have a fact sheet online, which I can put in the chat too, that walks you through that tax credit. for folks who want to have something in front of them.
Yeah, because that wasn't particularly clear through the Rewiring America. I read through it pretty intensely, and it just lists all the numbers and it doesn't say there's a cap anywhere.
Yeah, so one thing that we're working on, because the calculator you can input your income and your location, and it'll show you what incentives are available to you. But other than that, it's relatively static. So the next iteration of the calculator will be more iterative, and will show you we'll walk you through some pathways for how to maximize the incentives and actually how to sequence your projects. And this is under the banner of what we're calling the personal electrification planner. So hopefully by the summer, you should be able to input your household information, and then it can sequence the incentives and show you those caps and the subcaps, and that'll make more sense sort of on a timeline than just all at once on one page.
Okay, and the follow-up is, are there constraints on what items are covered or not covered based on being built in the US? I mean, all the stuff they talk about in terms of the constraints about what you can buy, who knows that information, and how do you validate that?
Yeah, so there are no requirements for any of this stuff for being built in the US. There are the car requirements. That's separate. Joel, if you want to, if you have easy access to the fueleconomy.gov site and they have a list of cars that qualify. But for the home improvement credits, so your heat pump water heaters, there's no Build America, Buy America requirement, but there are efficiency requirements. So that's the big limiting factor here. For the tax credits, the easy thing to do would have been to tie them to Energy Star, but again, nothing is easy. So the bill actually ties them to a sort of quasi-governmental organization called the Consortium for Energy Efficiency, and their efficiency credits. I will put in the chat, the CEE, the Consortium for Energy Efficiency, is maintaining a list of qualified products. But hopefully once that list sort of gets around, and it'll be continually updated, I think every 2 weeks, then your contractor should know which products qualify. And then the rebates are tied to Energy Star, so that's a little bit easier.
Yeah, I would say in general, we're, the car thing, they just came out with the cars that are currently qualified. I put that in the chat. The equipment requirements are still being developed, but in general, if possible, just try and get better stuff. And so the higher the ratings on the heat pumps in terms of what's known as SEER or HSPF, the higher the numbers, the better the equipment is, meaning the more efficient it is. And so if you go and get quotes from contractors, you should try and get at least 3 contractors to give you quotes. You should ask them for multiple equipment options from those quotes, and you should ask them for what the best equipment is that they sell and give pricing on that, because you might pay more upfront, but that equipment might last longer and just cost less to run over time. And so again, all this is going to, this talk will be a lot clearer by the end of the year or the beginning of next year, when the rebates are rolled out and all of the guidance is set. But for right now, you're all in the early adopter phase, and just, ideally get better stuff and it will probably qualify. I can't guarantee that, but given the uncertainty, higher SEER, better stuff.
Yeah, I did just put the qualifying product list in the chat. But again, relying on consumers to leap through these spreadsheets is not the best way to go. So we are working on educating manufacturers and distribution centers so that their contractor networks know which equipment qualifies, so that if you have a contractor that works with Mitsubishi or works with Carrier, they'll know which equipment is eligible for the tax credits and rebates.
Awesome. Thanks, Noah. We'll have to have you guys back at the end of the year to do this again. Brian.
Hi, thank you. This has been really good information so far. My question is, on a pretty specialized and I think challenging sector, which is manufactured and mobile homes. And I'm wondering what ideas you guys have for finding anything from energy auditors to contractors to equipment that will actually work in the mobile home, manufactured home sector. I live in a mobile home that is a 1965, so it's a real challenge. I live in a park that's 60 years old and and I think this is kind of common in, especially in older parks, at least here in California it is, but it has a setup which is a master meter sub meter system, which means every space in the park gets a 50 amp main breaker, and that's all we get. So just maybe some thoughts on challenges to electrifying everything in this kind of a setting.
Sure.
Just an example. Our furnace died 2 years ago. We thought we'd get a mini split. That's when we discovered we had a 50 amp main breaker, and the first contractor was perfectly willing to put it in for us. The second guy said, "You'll never run your oven if you're running your mini split at the same time." So anyhow, that's my question.
So 50, so the 50 amp panel is small relative to full electrification, but there are options. So your first question about finding an auditor and finding a contractor, I put 2 links into the chat. One is you can check the Building Performance Institute's contractor finder. You can even look for like a gold star or whatever they call them, contractor. And those are people who can do energy audits as well as potentially do air sealing and weatherization, which are also covered by both the tax credits and the rebates. And for HVAC, you can check ACCA, that's the Air Conditioner Contractors of America, I think. They have a finder of contractors as well as a checkbox for a quality assured contractor. And so those are 2 sources for, hopefully better contractors. You can check out the reviews of those contractors that you find, and you can also check the websites of those contractors and see if they list heat pumps on their website, as well as call them up and say, "Hey, what do you think about manufactured homes?" As far as the contractor who said that you'll never run your oven and your heat pump at the same time, that might be okay. I mean, I'm trying to find the link from. I don't know if I put it in the earlier one. Oh, here, maybe I put it in earlier, but I'll put it in again. There's this this document here from Peninsula Clean Energy tries to get at the idea of managing the 100 amp electrification planning, such that they have devices that are they're sort of like power strips for your electrical panel, except instead of just being a power strip, it will turn one thing on and the other thing off. So if you're sharing a circuit between your stove and your car charger, that when you're cooking, you're not charging your car. Or when you're cooking, you're not maybe running your heat pump, but you only cook for 30 to 60 minutes. So maybe it's okay for your heat pump to be off for that amount of time. You know what I mean? Like, again, 50 amps might be low if you want to fully electrify with a car and everything. But manufactured home, what's the square footage of your house?
It's 1,000 square feet.
So 1,000 square feet, I mean, you might be able to get away with, so I should also say, not just get away with, but like that portable heat pump that I talked about earlier, that I bought online for $700 and that we used as renters. I think that'll do up to, 800 square feet or something like that. And like, you might be able to heat most of your house using a regular 120 volt plug-in, essentially window unit. I'm not recommending this per se, but like if you did get a mini split, they are pretty efficient, and they're like, I think like a kilowatt or something. So the contractor who said that you can't fit, maybe you just need a different contractor, and you do need help if you're going to really try and do it on 50 amps. It might be a struggle, but if you get an EV and you plug it into a regular wall outlet and you get 40 to 50 miles of range every night over 8 to 10 hours, and you're not driving 200 miles a day, maybe that's enough. So there's like lots of ways to, and also I should say that there are heat pump water heaters that are coming to market now that run on 120 volt, 15 amp circuits. So you could potentially get one of those. There are stoves that are coming to market from one of our colleagues at Rewiring America. He also is running this company called Channing Copper, where they're going to have batteries in the induction stove so that it will also plug into a 120 volt outlet. So, and they're trying to make these quote unquote retrofit ready so that you don't need an electrician to do the work. But as a result, they also don't need electrical upgrades. So I would, I applaud your efforts. And I would say there's tricks you can, they're not even true. They're not, I say call them tricks. They're planning that you can try and do to fit everything onto the panel. And you know, in general, if a contractor tells you that you can't do something, call another contractor. Don't take the contractor's word as gold, because a lot of contractors are not aware of the state of the market. And they're laggards, you know, they don't want to change the way they've always done stuff. Not all of them, and some of them will give you good advice. I'm not poo-pooing them all. I'm just saying, like, if they come and they say this is impossible, ask somebody else. And you can also email us. I mean, I'm Joel at rewiringamerica.org. Anybody feel free to email me. If I don't know the answer, I'll try and get you an answer. But don't just say, well, I guess that one guy said that, so therefore I can't do it. There might very well be a way, and it might already be commercially available.
Well, I'll tell you, those are interesting ideas too about because I've been intrigued by the heat pump water heater and and thinking about that stove option. Because, you know, when we bought this place almost 6 years ago, I put in a gas stove because I love cooking on gas. I'm nothing against induction at this point, but you know, it's a new stove. So if these battery included induction stoves come along, then that's a great idea when that comes to market. And when our 5-year-old water heater finally dies, then the heat pump's the next step. So, you know, it's good to know there's options.
There'll be even more options in 5 more years.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, I just want to note for you that NOAA put a DOE guide that's specific to manufactured homes, a link to that in the chat. So I just want to flag that for you.
Are you guys going to save the chat or send out these?
Yeah,
links?
absolutely. So we'll send all of you the recording of this, and you'll be able to see the chat, and we'll make sure to include all the awesome links that have been shared. So make sure that you get everything that was shared live in the call.
Thank you.
Brian's question is kind of bringing up a bit of a policy question for me, which, like, Brian, like, you're in this situation where you're, individually trying to electrify, but, you're also on this kind of community grid in this park. And so maybe this is kind of a question for NOAA, but, like, are there any incentives or options right now, or do you think there will be in the future in terms of, like, electrifying en masse, right? Like as a group, as a community?
Yeah, there are a few options, and I'm sure that Joel can speak to some of these too. You're right that a bunch of the sort of, by nature, the consumer-facing incentives in the IRA are focused on individual households. There are grant programs in the IRA and also from the infrastructure law that was passed in 2021 that are giving money to communities and to local and state governments. So there is $5 billion for climate pollution reduction grants. So this is money to states and municipalities across the United States that can use that money to electrify communities. There's also the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is $20 billion in low interest loans plus $6 billion in grants for the same purpose. So that's explicitly to put solar on folks' houses, to electrify their homes. And that could have a more community bent to it, because you do achieve some great outcomes when you can zoom out a little bit and get to economies of scale, and to you can drive down costs, and you can decommission gas lines, as Joel likes to point out. once you're ramping things up a little bit. There are also, on the local level, there are building performance standards or other energy codes that can force landlords' hands a little bit and start to align the incentives toward community-wide electrification. So if you do have a building performance standard that, so you need to reduce emissions from every building by 40% by 2030 or by 2027, then that can start getting the incentives pointed in the right way. And as a organization, Rewiring America is also very interested in this question because once you start to aggregate demand, you can get contractors on board, you can get manufacturers on board. It's a more appealing prospect for something like, corporate involvement if there's a big employer or a tech company that wants to offset its own emissions by investing in community-wide electrification. So there are lots of exciting possibilities there.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That's fantastic to know. And for these grant programs that you mentioned, maybe like, are there links so that people can find out about that? I can get those to people after this call, or
yes, I'll find something and put it in the chat for those programs, and also for the rebate programs. A lot of this, those programs are directed towards state and local governments, but as citizens and residents, we can call those administrative bodies, we can call our state energy offices and ask for that funding to be used for electrification, or to, if you're a renter, you can ask for some of that funding to supplement the IRA incentives for renters or for manufactured homes. So we'd encourage folks to call and, advocate for the money being spent in this way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. All right, we are nearing the end of our time. Are there any, probably have time for one more question before we wrap up? And if there are no more,
I'll
Ryan,
hop in. This isn't totally formulated yet, but I've been curious and haven't looked it up. For the IRA and the infrastructure bill, is it kind of just like you're just talking about, you need to call the states and make sure that they're using this money? Is there like a floor to how much money will be invested in all this stuff? And it can get higher and higher based on states actually calling and applying and all that. I'm curious, like what that looks like and how much people have to actively seek this out to really maximize the potential here.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. One of the most exciting things about the IRA is that its potential is so much greater than the actual spending itself, or even than the spending was rated for, because specifically on the tax credit side of things, the Congressional Budget Office estimates potential uptake, but uptake could be much higher than that. So it's kind of amazing to see the potential investment that can go into communities if they're reaching wide-scale electrification, because the CBO estimates are really very conservative. So if we're getting our friends and our neighbors and our communities to electrify, that's really incredible wealth that's flowing from the federal government to our neighborhoods and our blocks. And that's really exciting. Things like the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is the low interest financing, also has a really significant multiplier because that attracts additional private sector investment, and that can make the money go much further. So I think that there are key ways for state and local governments to make this money go as far as possible. That might look like so if you're going to call your state energy office, one thing you might ask for is for that office to focus its grant funding less on utility scale solar, for example, or other industries that have sort of reached maturity, and more on building electrification or community solar or microgrids or some other more nascent use of the funding that can attract additional investment and sort of kickstart that whole process. So, the focusing the money on the younger industries could really pay off in the long run.
Great, thank you. Well, we are at our hour. And I'd love to just offer both of you, Joel and Noah, an opportunity to like leave us with any kind of final calls to action or nuggets of wisdom that you wanna drop on us before we close.
I'll go. Just keep going. I mean, yes, it's still a bit opaque. Yes, there's not clarity about everything, both in terms of the rebates, certainly, which are coming again late this year, early next year, or even in terms of the tax credits. But don't let that discourage you from calling contractors, from taking a test drive of an EV that you'd consider, from checking out your own equipment and seeing when it might die and starting to make a plan. I mean, the thing that you want to do is avoid emergency replacements where your hot water heater goes out and you get another one that lasts another 10 years because you didn't know who to call and you didn't have the wiring done and you just wanted hot water again. I mean, you don't really care where the power comes from to make, you don't care where the energy comes from to make your water hot. You just want hot water. So if you do some work now in the next few weeks or next couple months on as many of the things in if you get that home guide, the Electrify Everything in Your Home guide, there's a chart at the beginning that has a do now activity for each of the 10 items. And the more of those things you can check off, the better position you'll be in, either for getting your rebates if you're income qualified or getting all of your tax credits over the next 10 years. You can also use the Go Electric guide where we have these case studies where we try and map out how some people, fictionally go and take advantage of the tax credits. That could be you. So if you're interested in electrifying everything, which we are happy to see you here, and we're happy to spend the time helping you, don't be discouraged. Make a plan, get it done. You will succeed. It's not impossible. It's not even that hard. It just requires some work.
Great. Thanks, Joel.
Yeah, I think Joel put it really well. I'll just add that I just saw a paper the other day looking at how folks are influenced to act or not on climate, and the number one indicator was social pressure and normative behavior. So if you do install a heat pump or rooftop solar or get an electric vehicle, talk about it, tell your friends and neighbors so that they know that this is happening, especially for something like a heat pump or heat pump water heater that's inside your home. I think folks just don't know that there are already heat pump water heaters on their block being used by their friends. And so the more that we talk about it, the more people feel comfortable with these newer technologies and know that it's an option for them too.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Or even invite them to your walkthrough with your contractor. It's helpful because there's so many questions you don't know to ask. And if they watch you doing it, then they can do that.
That's a great idea, Rich. That's a really great way to share resources in that way, right? If you're already on it, because that can feel like a big hurdle for folks. So I love that idea. Thanks for sharing that. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be here and dig into this on this nitty-gritty level. This is really this is how the change happens. So thank you. And we will follow up with the recording, everything that's in the chat you'll get. So don't worry about scrambling to grab those links. And Joel has been kind enough to let you know that his email is joel@rewiringamerica.org. So ask these folks your questions, keep these relationships alive, because these guys are working really hard to make this possible for everyone. So we'll just keep going, like Joel said. Thank you all, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.